The scripture lesson this morning comes to us from Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 to 15. And last week we read about how Moses was rescued from the river Nile. And now he is a grown man and he is married. And I guess he fled Egypt for the fear of his life. And now he's in the wilderness as a shepherd, I guess. And one day he has a very important encounter with God. And Clyde and I will read this together.
Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, "I must turn aside and look at this great sight, and see why the bush is not burned up." When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush,
"Moses, Moses."
And Moses said, "Here I am." Then God said,
"Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground."
And God further said,
"I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob."
And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said,
"I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt."
But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said,
"I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain."
But Moses said to God, "If I come to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your ancestors has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" God said to Moses,
"I am who I am."
And he said further,
"Thus you shall say to the Israelites, 'I am has sent me to you.'"
And God also said to Moses,
"Thus you shall say to the Israelites, 'The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this my title for all generations.'" Herein is the good news. Thanks be to God. Whenever we encounter a health problem, there is a sense of fear. We tend to think the worst. We go and see a family doctor, just like Dr. Duckmark, and we breathe a sigh of relief if there is a diagnosis, as the doctor tells us what we can do about it. Once the illness is identified, then there is a way to get a proper treatment. But if the family doctor does not know, then he or she may refer us to a specialist. And if the specialist does not know, then we now are in trouble because it is difficult to treat an illness in which there is no name. So it is important to know the name. When it comes to God, we encounter an unfathomable mystery. Yet we have an invaluable clue. In the book of Exodus, chapter 3, it tells the only incident that I know where God reveals the name. On Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb, Moses sees a burning bush which could cause a forest fire. Yet the fire was not consuming the tree. Even more strangely, the fiery tree called Moses by name and said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Moses wanted to know more. Moses was bold and curious enough to ask for the name. God answered, I am who I am. Thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. So we gained valuable insight into God through the name of God, which was revealed to be I am. In Hebrew, God is represented by 4 letters, YH, WH, without the vowels. God's name was considered so sacred, no one was allowed to say it. So the story goes, people have forgotten how to pronounce the name. The tradition has been to add the vowels A and E, so we pronounce the name of God as Yahweh. There is also another way of pronouncing God's name by adding the vowels E, O, A. In other parts of the world, they pronounce God's name as Yehovah. In English, however, we say Jehovah, which comes after mispronouncing Y for J and W for V. Yahweh is believed to be a derivative of the to be verb. In other words, I am. This tells me that God is a verb, not a noun nor an adjective. God is the one who constantly creates, renews, heals, empowers, moves, produces, loves, enjoys, rests, etc., etc., etc. All we have to do is look around and notice God at work in creation. The cycle of nature is constantly moving, growing, feeding, flying, propagating, blossoming, bearing fruits in a wonderful web of life. We also see this in the children's ability to learn, grow, and play. We see this in the scientists working day and night to discover something new. We see this in studios where artists are creating new works of art. We see this in the kitchens as people create a meal to feed their families and soup kitchens to feed the homeless. We see this in the work of journalists who engage in prophetic truth-telling. Life in God contains so much creativity, a persistent desire for truth, moral goodness, and sublime beauty. In all these, I believe that God's heartbeat is reverberating through all the veins of life here on earth and throughout the universe. I believe this to be so because God's name is I am. God is not a static being, but a dynamic being who creates and animates all life. The other thing that we learn is that God cares about the affairs of human beings. As God said to Moses, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey. God knows the cries of the pain, the humiliation of being oppressed, and the evils of the slave master. I believe God knows what is happening right now with the police shooting of yet another unarmed black man, Jacob Blake. God knows the pain and the sorrow. God is on the side of the suffering and the oppressed. God is seeking to free the people from oppression and to lead us to the promised land of peace and justice. The real issue is not blacks versus whites. Rather, the issue is freedom versus oppression, justice versus brutality, and respect for human dignity versus racial hatred. Essentially, God is on the side of life that is whole, sacred, and flourishing, rather than the side that destroys, humiliates, and oppresses. After all, God's name is I Am. In the hymn book More Voices 161, I have called you by your name. In the verse 2, it says, I will help you learn my name as you go. Read it written in my people, help them grow. The name of God that we learn is I Am. The name is written in us. We can read it and we can feel it pulsating with the heartbeat of life, the breath of life, and in the deep longing for a better life in this world. Finally, God sent Moses to free his people. Essentially, God uses human agency to bring about radical change. God does not want us to be a silent partner, but an active participant in bringing about the new creation. Here in the photo, we have NBA referees marching in support of racial justice with a t-shirt that states, everybody versus racism. We do not do this work just on our strength alone. We do it with one another, united and uplifted by the Spirit of God who works in us. God, who is I Am, is with us. We are not alone. Thanks be to God.